Hey, did you see that really cool intro I made? Yup, I actually made an intro. This is officially a series I'm doing. So, that's pretty cool. I was going to read Super Mario 64 Damned, but I forgot to hit the record button and I don't want to read that all again. So, I'm just going to do like something that's a bit shorter. This creepypasta is called Axe Candle Rose, and I think it's a pokepasta. Yes, it is. It is a pokepasta. Anyways, without further ado, we are going to go ahead and we are going to read this creepypasta. Will it be good? Will it be bad? Who knows? We'll see. Pokemon Red and Green versions began development in 1989 and were considered complete and fit for release in 1995. It took a long time because of the problems surfacing along the way. These were considered at the time to be due to the game being on the cutting edge of new technology, because the programmers were overcoming bugs that no one had needed to work around before. In 1992 to 1993, when the first playable sections of the games were completed in alpha form, it started a long struggle. Hidden machine moves didn't exist at this point. Instead, the player had to use items to get around. For example, the surfboard item allowed the player to surf across the water. This item was still in programming when the beta version was released, and some more hardcore gamers managed to hack into the game again. Instead of cut, the player would use the item axe on trees. Instead of flash, you would use a candle. The escape rope was supposed to be replaced by dig, but for some reason that wasn't removed. It made perfect sense and seemed to work just fine until one of the alpha version testers used a candle inside of a building. The screen fogged up the smokescreen attack animation covering everything. A text box appeared saying, "Hurry, get away." The door sound played, the character would be returned to the overworld and the building would be blackened in. You could no longer enter it. The axe worked perfectly for removing small trees. It also worked perfectly on people in some sections of the fences that hemmed the entire playable world. Upon using the axe on a human NPC, the sprite would vanish and be replaced by a small patch of dark pixels. This looked most like the blood it was meant to represent in the red version and slightly odd in green. It became a morbid joke among the testers, who all assumed these things were programmed in just to try to spook them, and that they would be removed from the final versions. They were, mostly. Escape rope was considered a step too far by some. Upon the player standing and facing the doorway, if you were to select the escape rope, it would form a noose and the player character would be hung. The only way to get out of this was to switch the game off and continue from the last save. One of the testers left, and a new person was hired in his place. The new guy didn't appreciate the sick jokes that the programmers played on the testers. The others simply laughed it off and told him not to be so touchy. He insisted, however, that these were children games and that the programmers shouldn't be adding things, even if they were temporary and meant as a joke. That was so long ago. I've forgotten his name. Kenta or something? He complained to the higher-ups about the added extras. The programmers were questioned and one was even fired over the incident. The claim was that they were wasting time and resources. To be fair, by this time we had no music and basic sound effect in the game, which made the extra effects even more gruesome. Using the axe on a person would now trigger a high-pitched squealing sound along with the disappearance in a puddle of blood. Burning buildings also had an added repetitive crackling sound effects that was meant to imitate fire for the best of the old technology's ability. And lastly, if the escape rope was used, a singular crack would play. None of these programmers actually ever owned up to putting the dark extras in. They all claimed to have never seen them before, but they began to suspect each other when they realized their jobs were on the line. Who knows if that programmer that was fired actually had anything to do with it. It was decided that the items would be scrapped entirely, and hidden machine removes were invented to enable the player's progress instead. The remaining programmers found that it was a lot of trouble attempting to erase the items from the code and resorted to burying them to render them unusable or inaccessible. The effect was the same as erasing them, right? It worked, and the whole incident was forgotten. That is, until the beta versions were released to the public. Hackers started taking an interest in the game's coding. There were the famous incidents surrounding Lavender Town and the music that so badly affected the younger players, but there were one or two cases in which hackers had uncovered a buried item in the game's codings. And the disturbing images that came with them combined with the overall music caused him to completely lose himself. Almost no records of what happened exist, but I remember hearing on the news back then that a high school student has taken an axe to her classmates. She's pulverized them as much as possible, turning them into an indistinguishable puddles of human's flesh. Her surviving friend says that she had become with her new Pokemon game in the time leading up to the attack. One of them, in an interview for a TV news bulletin, describes her as a maniac for Pokemon. She was always excited about secrets in the games. The axe-wielding girl, of course, was hospitalized. She never spoke to a word to anyone. But the nurses that took care of her claimed to hear her hum a tune that night. They said it was creepy and unsettling and made them feel uncomfortable. The girl is in her 30s by now, hopefully somewhere secure. An older fan of the games had his office burned down, just months after the incident with the girl and the axe. It was played off by the media as nothing more than a tragic accident. After all, fire is quite a common risk in old multi-story buildings full of paperwork. The strange thing about it was the only survivor was a man. Apparently he had left the building preemptively, blocking the doors as he went. All the police managed to find was that the fire had started in a stationary cupboard, the only evidence being a pool of melted wax amongst the charred shelves and debris. He claimed that the tragedy shocked and horrified him, and that he had nothing to do with it. He was still under suspicion, and the police found several boxes of candles and a few hacked copies of Pokemon Red and Green in his apartment. I don't remember if he was convicted for arson after that. I just remember a news bulletin showing a burned game cartridge in a man's house. There are more, all hushed up and forgotten with time, but the modern world's computer technology, game ROMs, and so on, there's a real risk that someone might be able to uncover these items again, unless the newer versions of the old alpha coding was successfully removed, but nobody would have been looking for it in order to do so, would they? The thought terrifies me. I don't think I can handle seeing these things happen again, knowing that I was a part of it, and that someone might eventually find me and question me. The music plays in my ears every day, that tiny pulse of Lavender Town. Although I survived for this long, it's time to end the struggle. I'm writing this now as a warning to anyone who may have read it. Don't go looking for buried items. My escape rope is waiting. Well, that was a pretty interesting creepypasta. I like how it still tried to stay realistic. I did find it interesting that it also mentioned Lavender Town. That's pretty interesting. Guess it was trying to tie into something? I don't really know. But yeah, this was a pretty good pokepasta. And, well, it wasn't perfect, but, you know, it was good. But it wasn't anything fantastic or incredible. But, yeah. That's really all I gotta say for this creepypasta. Anyways, that's it for today, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.